cabinet.
Oh, just a moment, everybody. I meant to record this, but I forgot, so I'm starting to record now, just so you know.
Okay.
And by the way, my plan was to, but I didn't. I failed because somebody reminds me next time, is to record these and put them up on YouTube for any one of us to listen to later, or other members of the group who couldn't make it tonight who want to listen in. But just so you're aware, we're recording this. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I've got this big thing right in the middle of my screen. You don't see it up there, but and it says leave meeting, which I don't want to do, and the other one says got it. So I guess I'll just click that.
Yeah, click got it.
Didn't go away. Okay, good. Yes. So now I'm seeing somebody else, but okay. Hi. And okay, so the best and the brightest. And Kennedy joked about it a little bit. He said there's never been such a collection of intellect in this room. They were in the White House since Thomas Jefferson dined here alone one day, so something like that. But they completely blew it. They completely blew it in the Vietnam War and everything else, even regardless of whether you thought what they were trying to do was bad or not. They couldn't do it. They failed. And this has happened again and again. And we're seeing now, I don't think it's going to be too long before so many things that many people thought were just sacred about this whole COVID thing are explode in their face. And if information is coming out now that they blew it too. And in Washington, D.C., some of the powerful, influential people in the government who seem to be really running things seem to be very incompetent as well. So it may be that these oligarchs who are running everything will be their own undoing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that historically that's what happens. The oligarch, just like autocrats, dictators and kings sometimes push too hard and they end up, sowing the seeds of their own destruction. But the point is, in fact, that there are some people who fear that's in the making, and the point is, hopefully that doesn't have to come to bloodshed, mass bloodshed, but it has happened before, and and things have to get pretty bad before they get that bad. But some people see that that's the direction things are going. I mean, there's going to come a point in which people are going to realize that the government isn't doing anything that they want the government to do. At the same time, it's calling itself a democracy. It's one thing if they would just come out and admit it. Okay, we are an oligarchy. We know better than you. We're going to decide things from now on. You may not like it, but at least you know what you're up against.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's partly what we're trying to get at in this whole thing. And there are some serious thinkers and political scientists, political philosophers who have been aware of this for quite some time, and are struggling with, well, what can we do, given that the powers that be have gotten so huge, short of some kind of mass violence, which is difficult to imagine unless things get much, much worse than they are now. And maybe some would say the art of government is keeping people unempowered, but only to the extent that they're not so terribly oppressed that they rebel. So you want to take advantage of them, but not too much, because if you overdo it, you'll sow the seeds of your own destruction. So it's a delicate balance they're playing to keep how much can we milk from this public without having them rebel, And anyway, we'll get to that later in the next two sessions, actually. But you mentioned something earlier, David, about the oligarchs, and there are in the write-up. There's some interesting proposals by a political philosopher named Jason Brennan, who's been studying elections for a long time. He wrote a book called The Ethics of Elections. It's about the ethics of voting. His point, he's not against democracy or in favor of epistocracy, but he does point out that what he seems to be trying to do is get people's awareness up about these things. And he's suggesting that if we were to really what are the reasons why people in for example, the United States, vote when they go voting. There are three possible motivations you might have, or at least classes of motivations, and there's no reason to stop you from having all three, although they're independent of each other. The first one is the very naive belief that your individual vote could make a difference in a grand election. And the answer is no, it doesn't. As an individual, now we'll come back there, there's a way in which your vote could help in a different way, but not as an individual vote. And the naive view there is that, I mean, people have this, well, what if it was a tie vote and, you know, there were 100 million people in the country and 500, 50 million of them voted one way and 50 million and one voted the other way, and yours, you hadn't voted yet. You could break the tie in theory, and that's what people have in mind. And the answer is, not only is that extremely improbable, but even if it were to happen, no, your vote wouldn't break the tie. And we know what would happen. Like what happened in the 2000, with the Bush-Gore thing, and it wasn't even that close then. It's going to end up in the Supreme Court. There are going to be accusations of miscounts on all sides. It's going to go in the law courts. It's going to end up, it is going to be decided by one vote, but not a citizen's vote. It's going to be decided by a Supreme Court justice in a tiny democracy of 9 people. That's what's going to happen. Go ahead, Paula. Your mic is off, I believe. Mike, Paula? I can't hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, okay. I think that's true in the United States in a national election, but democracy functions at all different levels. In small municipalities, a single vote could make a difference and does, actually. And I think that part of the problem is that we think about democracy as only in this sort of huge, the huge context of an American federal election. But there are elections that happen all over the place at all different levels, and sometimes they, at least in my country, they can sometimes make a difference, even at a level beyond the level that you're actually voting for. I mean, who you choose as a local representative can influence what happens at another level. So I'm not quite as cynical about a single vote.
Yeah, well,
as you seem to be.
No. I wasn't not talking about the context you're talking about. In fact, that's the one situation in which democracy, direct democracy, does work. When we're talking about a small community, like ideally this group here, the 10 of us or 8 of us that are whatever are here right now, the 12 of us, if we were running the country, our individual vote would make a huge difference. We could make or break laws. The Supreme Court of the United States with 9 justices, that is a perfectly functioning democracy there. The smaller it is, the more exactly it works like it's supposed to. But in small towns, small communities, where everybody, especially because people are more likely to know each other, to be able to interact, the smaller the community, the more likely there's something called epistemic intimacy, which means that if the group is small enough, there's a chance that you know these people, or at least know people who know these people, or have heard of them, and more than just, they're a complete stranger. But at the scale of nation states involving millions of people, that doesn't work. It breaks down where an individual vote. There are statisticians and mathematicians who study this, who say there's no way, even apart from the unlikelihood of a tie, where it really is down to one vote, which is in the billions. The chances that it's going to happen are 1 in a billion or more. And even in that extremely unlikely possibility that it did happen at large scale, there is going to be accusations left and right of somebody didn't count right. You had to recount. You recount, you get different numbers every time you recount, and it ends up being decided by a committee of people like in the US, the Supreme Court. That's what happened in the Bush-Gore election back in 2000 or something. So no, I wasn't suggesting that your individual vote doesn't matter in all contexts. It matters the most, the smaller the context you're in. Obviously, yeah, go ahead.
No, I would say I know that I would say that that something like a rural county in a state like Iowa, maybe with 22,000 people or something like that, and a few local newspapers and whatnot, that there a small group of people can get together and make a big difference. And I know because I've done it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
No,
In Canada, just a while ago, we had a town where one count definitely made the difference because only one person voted, and that was the soon-to-be mayor.
Well, it wasn't that extreme.
yeah. All right. Okay. Well, yeah, but we are talking here about democracies at the level of nation states, and there are countless studies of this that show that as an individual, your vote doesn't matter. But even if leaving that, that's just one possible motivation for voting. There's a second motivation, and there's actually three, but they all have their problems. But the second motivation, and maybe this is the one that perhaps most people moves most people to vote, and that is the sense of it's not that they believe their vote is going to make a difference, but they believe they feel an affinity with a particular group. There's a sense of solidarity that not my vote, but my vote is part of a larger block, and I agree with the views of that block. My vote can help that block, win over another block that I don't agree with. Like, say, you're firmly a believer in Democratic or Republican politics in the United States, or any political party. If you believe your party truly embodies your values, and whatever that party wants is what you agree with, and your vote might in fact help make that party or that bloc stronger, that might be a reason to vote. But this is mostly about kind of a social solidarity, a need to be part of something bigger than yourself. If that's the motivation for voting, then it's not what I said earlier about the individual. But this is no longer about individual voting now. It's about supporting some need people have to be part of something bigger than themselves. Like it shows up in many aspects of human behavior, like people who root for their baseball team or sports team. They tend to fall on one side or the other. There's a tendency to want to affiliate yourself with this group or that group. Not for all of us, but for many people. And so what's wrong with that motivation for voting? And this we talked a lot about last time in the representative part, and that is it was sometimes called the binary problem, and that is that these groups tend to whittle down to very small numbers, like this team or that team. And if you're an intelligent, thoughtful person, you usually have higher standards and say, well, I only need two choices in my life. Most of us have very complex values that can't be satisfied with this or that. We want something much more nuanced, and so if you have to choose between this and that, it tends to make a lot of people become non-voters. I mean, what's the point? I don't agree with either of these parties. And so it motivates a lot of non-voting. There was a study once that said that if none of the above was actually an option on most voting ballots, none of the above would win most of the time. And so we would have empty offices in government. And it's partly because of the sense that people feel that they're pushed into this or that. It's like that's what it comes down to, a scale when you are willing to say your vote is about supporting a bloc rather than something more individual, where you feel.
Canada. In Canada, we have occasionally parties called, say, the Rhino Party, where you're actually voting for a rhinoceros. Okay. And that is our none of the above. Okay.
Yeah. Well, the problem with block voting is that a lot of people feel left out. They don't really agree with either of the options out there, and so they don't vote. So what happens then? I mean, that what happens to democracy in that situation, and we're going to get back to to that in a moment. But I want to mention the third motive, and the third one is
before you start, yeah, with just that one, the place to look for something to compare it to is the parliamentary systems in Europe, where they have more than just two parties, and some of them are quite small, but then they form coalitions and so on. And how well that works, well, nothing's working there right now, but how well that ever works, that's open to debate, but that would be where you'd look for some alternatives there.
Right.
You don't have to go as far as Europe. Actually, you can just go north of the border to find multiple parties and coalitions.
Yeah, most of Canada has like 5 or 6 parties in any general area.
Yeah. Are the parties, I'm asking about you guys in Canada, are they equally powerful, or they tend to, 2 or 3 tend to be?
No.
No,
Okay, you have the Liberals, the Conservatives, those are equivalent to your Democrats and Republicans. Then you have the NDP, the New Democratic Party. They're pretty big. In Quebec, there's the Bloc Québécois. They're pretty big in the East. But I would say the top 5 are 90% of the power. You're looking at, say, about 30%, 30%, 20, stuff like that.
but what makes a difference is that yes, there are 5, but realistically, in terms of the impact on governance, pretty much 3, and unless you're in Quebec. And the thing that makes a big difference is that smaller NDP party is small, but they're big, and right now they're governing in coalition with the Liberals federally. And so I mean,
Liberals and NDP combined is over 50%.
Well, over 50% of the seats.
Yeah.
Which gets back to another issue, but
Yeah.
but that's where I think the strategic decisions that people make at the ballot box are very different, because you can have an impact on the power of that third party and who it might or might not end up supporting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks. Well, my feeling is like as far Canada is probably not as bad a shape as the United States is. The very fact that you have
God, I hope not.
significant multiple parties, not insignificant ones like in the United States. And the point isn't that this is all or nothing, but would it be better, or would there come a point where this becomes chaos? Say you had 100 or 1,000 parties. What will be then? What problems do you see there, or would that just never happen as far as you?
In Canada,
I don't see it ever going more than, say, 6 or 7 or maybe 8 actual parties. Everybody else never has enough votes to actually get a seat. Like the Green Party, it's considered a big party because people actually know who they are, but I've never seen them have more than 3 seats out of what, 500?
So is there like a magic number that this is the right number of parties, but this is too many? What would you, if you had to guess what that number would be? Or
seems to me that there's a real advantage to having more than 2. I don't see a lot of, I mean, I've not thought about it a lot, but I don't see, it seems to me that the 3 major parties in Canada anyway are the ones that actually matter in federal elections. The others, you vote for them to make a statement, and people do that, but in terms of actually delivering seats to the House, they don't, well, except the Greens, a couple places in BC, I guess. But the other thing is that in Canada, and this is a detail that's maybe not relevant, but there are different parties, different configurations of parties in the different provinces, and that makes it just complicates people's loyalties. I mean, so in a
because the provincial
election,
Liberals are not the same as the federal Liberals. They have the same name, different parties.
Yeah, exactly.
right. Yeah. Well, it sounds like that you said, Paula, you said that about say 3 or so that are the parties that make the matter in terms of national policy, maybe four or something. But even so, 3 or 4 is very close to 2, and 2 is very close to 1. So there's better and worse here, and I think Canada's in a better position here than the United States. But I was trying to wonder, is there an optimal number of parties, and if so, what that number would be, or is it a cultural thing and it's just a random thing? I'm not sure, but
Somewhere between 3 and Israel.
okay. Yeah, well, the point is, even if it was as many as 3 or 4 viable parties, that there would still be a radical reduction, and there are millions of people in a country of this, certainly the United States, in Canada too, that it's still a huge reduction from 1 million different opinions to 2 or 3. That reduction is part of the problem with representation, but it's not necessarily a binary problem, but reduction to 3 or 4 would be better than reduction to 2, and 2 is just barely better than 1, but not by much. And there's a problem here with, you have to mold your views to match one of these very limited choices, unless you just happen to share these views.
The biggest problem with 2 parties is it's not 2 parties. It's one party alternating back and forth.
Right. Yeah. David.
Hey, Victor.
Yeah.
Mike and Agora have had their hand raised on there for a couple minutes. Mike was first.
Okay. Thanks. Okay, Mike, go ahead. And
yeah, as far as the number of parties, my opinion is infinite. It just don't have parties.
yeah.
And as far as the debate about whether votes count or not, and it was argued that the vote does count if you're in a smaller type of situation, like a local. But the fact is that in the United States, your vote can count a lot more depending upon where you happen to be located. Like in the battleground states in the last presidential election, your vote might matter a lot. And Victor, I disagree with you that your vote doesn't count as a general rule, because if everybody thought that, we'd still have Mr. Trump, and we got rid of him. So it's still a flawed. There's structural flaws that are evident. I mean, the House is gerrymandered pretty significantly. The Senate is tilted towards rural conservative. These are big, bad structural problems. And the president, the loser can win. So whereas, I mean, I think if we fix this if we actually, I don't know if fix is the right word, a big improvement would be to put an end to gerrymandering. It's been tried and it failed in the last time around. The Senate, I don't know how you can really fix that, but at least it's not gerrymandered. The president, just have the popular president, the person who wins the popular vote win.
Mhm.
So that's my opinion.
Thanks, Mike. Well, some of what you said is actually going to bring it up again in the final one, where we're going to talk about, well, what can we do about this? What can we do? You mentioned a number of things which would classify as reforming the existing system, and we'll talk about those in the final, and why they may or may not work, as the case may be. But we'll talk about that later. Is it Agora? Did you had your hand up?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Sure.
My name is Tade. Actually, I do represent the International Logic Party. From our perspective, you only need one party as long as it's not an ideological party, but a logical one. So I'm not going to get into, well, I'll come back to that in a moment, but I want to make the point that those who cast the votes don't really decide anything. Those who create the options decide everything.
Exactly.
If I was to give you the option between a shit sandwich and a shit soup, and you get to decide which one you get to have. You're still eating shit for dinner, so that doesn't really mean all that much. The other thing I'd like for you to illustrate the problem that we have with voting, I'd like you to imagine the situation. Let's say you have two voters. One of them is actually fully informed. This person studied, economics and other fields, science and whatnot. Very informed, right? Very informed voter. And then you have somebody who just really strolled into the voting booth by accident, and they both vote in the current system that we have. And you happen to be behind the curtain. You get to count the ballots, and you come across both of those ballots, one from a fully informed voter. This person knows how the world works. They know what's best for everybody, or at least they dedicated a lot of time to it, to developing their thinking. And then you have this imbecile, right? You would not be able to tell who cast which ballot. You would not be able to do that. It's impossible to do that, because there could be a number of reasons why somebody voted one way or another. Maybe because only one policy is the most important and they're voting strategically about that, and you don't know which policy that is. Or maybe, I don't know, they could be voting based on the party line, because that's their strategy. So based on their strategy, you're not going to be able to know what this person knows. And if you think of how inefficient that type of information transfer is, it's basically zero. Like, all of the wisdom, all of this learning that this one voter has is not registered at all by the ballot. That's insane. That's actually insane. So yeah, so again, voting, those who create the options are the ones who decide everything. And when all they give you is candidates, Joe Schmo and candidate, whoever, and none of these people really have the best ideas, or you don't know what's the likelihood of them enacting anything. You're not really deciding anything. Mm-hmm. So the solution to this is that people have to be making the decisions on the actual policies. They actually have to decide what, and yeah, sure, people might not know, as I know somebody else made this point before, people might not know what's the best thing, but they will learn. They have to suffer the consequences of the policies. And by being able to do that, then they learn. They can realize, okay, we've done this in the past. We shouldn't be doing that again. So that's a bad policy. And of course, if people had the power, they become a lot more invested in actually educating themselves. But so how do you solve this? How do you actually implement this? Well, this is where the International Logic Party comes in. We have a new kind of networking technology where people develop their own political philosophy. The way that a political candidate campaigns, they have their platform of the different positions. What do they intend to enact? We want every citizen to do that. Because if you're not doing that, then if you don't know what you want from your government, you have no basis to complain about it. Like, if you don't have your plan, nobody has the time to listen to you. Sorry, because you're just complaining. Tell us what you want, and then maybe we can discuss why you think we should be doing what you want. Because maybe we have some good ideas too, and maybe we can learn from each other. So anyways, this is how our platform works, is that each person develops their own political philosophy from different ideas. Then Igora shows which of those ideas are most strongly supported by the people. And then according to that, according to the will of the people, we're able to algorithmically create a list of ideal political candidates, essentially an assembly line of ideal political candidates, thereby making politicians completely replaceable and outsourcing the government to the people. There's a lot more I could say, but one real quick note I just want to add before I wrap up. Sorry, our website is currently not functional. Our SSL certificate just expired yesterday, and we're in the process of renewing that. So if you go to our website, it's probably going to be down today. It should be back up maybe later today, maybe tomorrow. So, but I do encourage you to check out our platform, Igora, the Worldwide Stock Market of Ideas. It's at igora-ilp.org. Thank you. I yield the floor.
Yeah, okay, just a second, I have a question for you. You said, well, who is it that creates, in your view, who is the person that's creating the options to choose from? Who are these people? Or
well, In my opinion, it's whoever is willing to. It's complicated. It's a machine. It's just a very complicated machine. It's the the two-party system. Each one of those, actually, the closest analog to how the Democratic or the Republican Party function is YouTube. That's like the closest business model. The voters are really just like the people watching, sometimes donating to their favorite creators, sometimes liking the videos or whatnot. But the actual owners, the actual, let's say uh, the people who benefit, who are the owners of the business, those are the actual content creators, the party bosses, and the party bosses who will eventually maybe get some good paying jobs in government. So that's who the actual who owns the business. The customers of the business are the big donors. Those are the big donors, and those are, well, and in YouTube, the analog to that would be, of course, the advertisers. So, anyways, sorry, I'm not prepared to give you an exact comparison, but that's how.
Yeah, well, it sounds like what you're saying is it's what I was saying earlier, that, or some other people have already said in the literature on this, and that it's technocrats, people in a position to control YouTube and the media and so forth. I mean, that we don't even find out about political options and parties without there being this intermediate, this media in between us and that. So they're shaping the options for us, I guess is what. Yeah.
Basically, it's big money. It's whoever's got big money that they make the government. They are the customer, and the political parties deliver the products, which are the laws that are favorable to the customer, to the big businesses.
Mhm. Okay.
So,
yeah. Well, first of all, I appreciate your comments, and also those of others here. These comments are all like really relevant to what, assuming that no one's actually perfectly happy with the way things are. I think, things that we're living in the best of all worlds, possible worlds here. We couldn't have a better government if we wanted. Assuming you're not one of those people, then you probably agree there's some kind of problem, or many problems. Maybe we disagree about the severity of those problems, but we're going to get to possible solutions in that last part. And some of what you suggested, Igor, will be, and also what others have suggested too, because in a way, all the problems we've been raising and talking about, they have been thought about by people, and people have tried to like bang their heads against the wall, say, well, in an ideal world, given, admittedly, this is not an ideal world, and how we're going to get from this world to that ideal world or anything close to it is the challenge. But even if somehow we could, what would that world, that political world, look like? What would be the best? Plato tried to do this 2,500 years ago in the Republic, and he did pretty well for his time. But we hopefully have learned a lot since then, and maybe we could do better if we tried. Anyway, we'll get to that on the last part. Does anybody else have any other comments at this point? Okay. I wanted to go ahead.
Yeah, Victor.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Jordan.
Yeah, so I mean, besides having, philosopher kings be able to be a representative, what values do we base that on? Like ranked choice voting seems to be like an option as far as the, some form of it where you're able to increase the options because you're not just throwing away a vote. You're able to try a fringe candidate or policy, if that's the route we went, where you can try it out, and then alternatives are, your fallback vote goes to that. So you're not just throwing your vote away to the absolute person you don't want to have. Something I was going to go back to, though, that we've been talking about, the reason why people are down, you're saying with the Oxycontin, and the reason why people are at such a state is there's a little bit beyond culture too with it as far as the biology. There's a Robert Sapolsky out of Stanford and some others who have done some different studies on the way testosterone works. So people's expectations are a little bit higher, have been higher, and now with all the things that are different now and changed, as far as they don't have the expectations they used to have, The way testosterone functions is if they reach, all we have to do is imagine what we want. And so because people had set expectations, that thing that they imagined not being met, not being reached to, increases their feelings of depression, not being reached. And so if it's just all I was saying it for is just another aspect beyond culture as far as why people would be depressed and those things, is because just set expectations they had of where their status should be and where it is. Anyways, that was just a part of there where then it creates, that us versus them sidestep of needing to find different routes to feel like they have people have purpose and things like that. But I'll leave it there.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Well,
okay. Go ahead.
sorry, just real quick. I may have to get going here. I do have another appointment, so I only have 10 more minutes here. I'm happy to connect with other people outside of this meeting. I do invite you all to check out the Agora platform. Again, I apologize for the technical difficulties we're having today. But I am looking to collaborate with other people. We're actually putting on a show called Agora versus Headlines, where we will be addressing the different news stories that are presented by the news media, and then engaging the audience by discussing about these news stories and what solutions we think would solve the underlying problems, engaging people in actually making decisions about the proposed solutions to those problems. So if anybody would be interested in, because really we need to maximize our outreach. Most people are accustomed to thinking that there's only talking and action, but people forget there's this critical step in between, which is deciding. And people have not decided anything meaningful about society for so long that they forgot that that's even a part of it. They think voting is deciding, but as I just demonstrated, voting means nothing. If you're just voting for faces, if you're voting for faces, you're not deciding anything about the policy. So we have to teach people how to actually take a position for real things and to put it to the test. Use the scientific method in that you make a hypothesis about what you think is true. That doesn't mean you're 100% convinced that that's true. It's a testable hypothesis. And then you put it to the test by actually challenging other people to also adopt that hypothesis. Because if they don't, they will probably give you some really great criticism of why they're not willing to adopt that hypothesis. Anyway, so we're going to try to do that in a show, hopefully try to entertain the public and hopefully teach them something in the process. Anybody who would be interested in collaborating on that project, please reach out to me. I'm going to put my email in the chat. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else have any immediate comment? Or I want, if nobody does, I was going to bring up some, I think, provocative.
I see Trevor's got his hand up. And
Who?
Victor, I think Trevor's got his hand
Oh, Trevor, go ahead. Go ahead, Trevor.
I wanted to mention something Jordan said. Jordan mentioned philosopher kings. Occasionally this idea pops up in these conversations and then is immediately dismissed as if it is, I don't know, impractical or outrageous, or like philosophy is literally the highest form of thinking that humanity has produced. And yet it's anyone who appeals to philosophy is typically laughed out of the room, often by philosophers themselves. Like there's something very strange whenever you appeal to flawless thinking. It's like the mind repels, like even in these discussions here, if you're to record it and sit down very carefully and go through it sentence by sentence, 85 to 90% of the facts that we're discussing are not factual. They're just beliefs. They're legends, colloquialisms, half-truths, true enoughs. We don't know any of these things that we claim to know. Like this notion that 2/3 of the population isn't knowledgeable and 1/3 is. And the reason they're knowledgeable is because they've read books. This is silly. This is horrible epistemology.
100% of the world is knowledgeable about different things.
No. Knowledge has a particular meaning. Knowledge justified true belief. The tea does not come for free, but it sure seems like it does. Just because you've read a book, you've ingested information, but there's no way of knowing the degree to which that information is true unless it's in very particular environments like physics that are deterministic and you can produce a reproducible correct answer.
Yes, but a
Greater
farmer
reality
who's
is
never read a book in
metaphysical.
his life knows that if he waters his plants, they will grow.
Right. So
That is knowledge.
okay, no. Right. That is knowledge. But if you then take that and say, because I read a book, therefore I have knowledge, that does not logically follow.
No, because
Right,
I've read
because-
Harry Potter. That
No,
doesn't
no,
make me
but
chosen.
because you have one instance
Mhm.
of something working, it doesn't prove that all instances of doing that works.
Mhm.
One instance is enough to disprove something, but it's not enough to prove something.
Okay.
But intuitively, it seems the opposite of that, right?
Right.
So humans run on intuition, and they will not give it up. They will fight to the
Right.
and even people who are more educated are worse, very often worse,
Okay.
because it gives you the impression of competency, but it's very often an illusion.
Okay, Trevor, I appreciate your comments, and they are relevant, but they also go in a different direction. In fact, we may do a topic specifically on that. We have in the past on justified true belief and what the definition of knowledge is, but that's really another field than political philosophy. And what you said at the beginning is correct. All the facts, even by people with multiple PhDs and Nobel Prizes like Angus Deaton, for example, who I quoted at the beginning, it's based on the best possible information that, relatively speaking, people who spend their whole lives at this and are acknowledged by their peers to be relatively good at it, what they believe, having done their research. That it could still be false. That's a given. But who else do we believe? I mean, who else are we going to go with? We have to go with what we think are reasonably authoritative sources.
Why do we have to do that?
Because we can't become all experts ourselves on everything forever.
But why do we have to go with something?
Because we have to accomplish things like have a government of some sort.
Okay, but we have to take action, but we don't have to categorize things as true.
That's correct. That part I agree with you.
So why do we do it then?
Well, we don't have to, and philosophers don't generally. They don't. They're very careful about what they're saying. They say, well, this is what the evidence we have to present to support this. Now,
This
you
is
can
not
believe it or
true.
not. Well, the ones I read all say that.
No, when you read their books, yes, but if you go to their meetups, when they're thinking in real time cognition, they aren't able to either.
Oh, well, there's a use of truth to mean, or fact, the word fact, for example, that's loosely people mean, well, this is what, given all the evidence that I have right now, this is my best guess as to what is the truth. But it's a guess, and it could be overturned tomorrow.
They will say that once you bust them hallucinating,
Mhm.
right? And then they'll say, oh, well, of course, it's just my opinion.
Right.
Of course, or of course I was just speaking, or of course, but at the time they spoke it, they were hallucinating.
Well, I don't think that all of them are. I mean, some are born skeptics. I like to think of myself as one of those. I'm not sure even I exist, let alone the political philosophy exists.
Okay, and then this is there's a normal distribution of things that will come, and we don't even know if we exist. This is going to be easily in the top 10. As soon as you turn up epistemology, every single human being will reach into their bag. Oh, I was just speaking loosely. Oh, I don't even know if we exist. Oh, I don't know this. Humans.
There are degrees of speaking loosely. There's some that are very loose and some that are, I'm 99%.
Is it possible that there's a serious problem here?
Yes, but it's actually epistemology, not political.
Right. But is it possible that it is highly relevant and has extremely high causal importance?
Yes, about any topic. Yeah,
Right.
truth.
So should we make sure we don't talk about it?
No, it's good that we brought it up, but we can let's make a whole topic on this. This is really a whole topic all by itself, and we've done it before in the past, but it's one that keeps coming up. So, yeah, stick around or propose one yourself. What you said earlier about your claim about knowledge being justified true belief, that's an old claim. It's been highly disputed, by the way, but it was a great topic. It's worth doing again. But anyway, I do want to stick to political philosophy here. And granted, at least speaking for myself, I don't know about anybody else here, but I don't know a thing about political philosophy except what I'm repeating what other people have said. And I'm trying to make as much sense of it as possible. And it may be all wrong, but it does seem to be that some things are more obviously wrong than other things, but maybe they're all wrong. And anyway, that's my personal opinion here. But I did want to bring up, if we have time, if people still want to continue on, some provocative ideas from a person who, since this is about focused on elections and voting, a philosopher who studied this very carefully. He's written books on it called The Ethics of Voting, in which he argues that most people in society should not vote, and that it is wrong for them to vote on ethical, moral grounds. And what he means by this is that just like if you come across an accident on the highway and you don't know anything about first aid, maybe the best thing for you to do is to do your best to contact somebody who does know something about first aid, rather than getting in there and doing something that could make matters worse. If you take voting seriously, and in theory, you should, because these are the laws. People's lives depend upon what these laws are, the quality of their lives. In some cases, whether life and death, things happen because of political decisions. Then people, if they're going to vote, should take it dead seriously. And to take something dead seriously means that you need to inform yourself about what's at stake here, who you're voting for, what the issues are. And if you don't go take the trouble to do that, you're voting irresponsibly. Like someone who just, decides to pick up an injured person in a haphazard way without thinking that they might do some harm by how they pick them up. It's irresponsible. If you don't, and he's not saying that you're under a moral obligation to inform yourself. Some of us are interested in politics. Some of us want to be informed, and some of us have the ability to be well informed and the luxury of the time and resources to inform ourselves. Not everybody has that. And for those people, by all means, they should be involved and learn about what's at stake and get involved in politics. However, not everyone fits that description. In fact, most people don't. Most people are, if you're a response, he's talking about here civic duty. Do we have a civic duty to vote? And he says, no. You have a civic duty to contribute to your society in some way or other, to the extent you care about the society you live in. But most of us can actually do more good doing other things than by voting. For example, and given how little your individual vote matters, unless it truly matters because you spent tremendous resources and time to get yourself informed. But if that doesn't describe you, then you would do better to do something which more clearly shows your concern about improving your community. For example, he says, for most voters, picking up one piece of litter on the street they live on does more to help their society than going to the voting booth. So if that's all you do, you're doing better than someone who votes, the typical voter. That's because that's how little your vote matters in the on average in national elections, unless you're talking about a very small community. Or there are many things. You could donate your time to some charity or to some organization that's trying to improve the quality of life of your community, rather than wasting your time learning about politics and politicians. There are a million different ways in which a civically responsible person could show that they are responsible than by going to vote, unless they have the luxury and time to truly have an informed vote. Now, for those people, they should vote, because if only informed, thoughtful people voted, we'd have better government. But since that isn't typically the case, many people vote for because their friends are voting, because they feel this is what their parents did. They just do it out of habit, or because they like the horse race, the entertainment value of politics, the debates, the back and forth. It's like a sporting event for them. If that's why you're voting, you shouldn't be voting. You should go do something more constructive with your time, more civically responsible with your time. So he makes a pretty good case for this, for why most people should vote. Now, he is saying that if you are a person that goes out of their way to be informed about what's at stake, then of course you are exactly the kind of person who ought to vote. But there's no moral obligation for you to be that kind of person. There are so many other ways in which you could be an upstanding citizen than by doing that, than by voting. And ideally, it depends on the person, what they're good at. He said that if you're a grocery store clerk and you can help your society better by being a very good grocery store clerk. Whatever it is you do it well. You're helping your community by doing that more than you would be by a haphazard vote. So he's arguing against people voting haphazardly, and let the people who know what they're doing do the voting. Anyway, what do you guys think about that?
Well, there's no reason why you can't pick up litter and vote.
But he would say, look, no, he's not just saying that you're wasting your time. You're doing harm. He's positively doing harm to vote unless you're an informed voter. You're not helping matters. You're making matters worse. It's better to stay out of the voting booth if you don't invest the time to learn about it.
Unfortunately, most voting situations, most elections are popularity game shows. Whoever has the most flair, like Trump, gets elected. And unfortunately, we saw what happened there.
Well, he didn't win, He's never won the popular vote ever.
Yeah.
And the last one was a landslide loss.
The people who get elected rarely get the popular vote, except in situations where, like Putin, who got 137% of the popular vote. But when you're dealing with the way the electoral college and all that stuff works in the States, it's a game show. You get enough people with loud enough voices, you get idiots in power.
Mm-hmm.
Can I make a comment? I've got one.
Go ahead, Mike.
Well, there's a couple of things. I don't vote everything on the ticket. The judges, I usually don't vote on. So if there's something I'm knowledgeable about and care about, I'm a lot more interested in voting on that topic. And the other thing is that you can also follow the advice of some supposed expert opinion. Like there's a guy I know on Facebook that I've known for a number of years, and he says, I'm voting for this candidate because of this. And I just say, well, that sounds reasonable. So, so there could be an educated opinion you follow. So, yeah, anyway.
Yeah, well, that's following the opinions of opinion leaders, people who are influential, but a responsible person who really wants to do the right thing and vote correctly can't rely on this or that expert, not if they're going to do their job. Or they need to consult many experts because experts disagree with each other. And which expert you decide to listen to, the first expert who comes along you listen to them, they might be wrong. And you need to listen to opposing views and then decide for yourself who's more convincing, who seems more. That's the way it ought to happen. And admittedly, he argues that of course, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of hard work to be thoroughly informed about all the issues and candidates as we ideally should be. But there are definitely some of us who do more of that, do work harder at being informed than others. And really, they should be the ones who do the voting. And the rest of us who don't have either the time or interest, and we're not bad people because we don't have the time or interest. We may have plenty of time to do other things, but they shouldn't be voting. What the bad people are those people who vote for because it's the trendy thing to do, or because all their friends are voting one way and they didn't ask themselves any good questions about whether that's the correct. Well, that's bad voting. That's destructive voting. He goes beyond that. It's not just that it's not helping matters, it's hurting matters, because it makes it's like, this is supposed to be, unless voting is truly not important, it's supposed to be important. And if you're just randomly, don't have a good reason for the person or the policy you're voting for, you're doing harm. You're better off doing something else more constructive. That's his point, anyway.
Well, there is a point that it does seem that people in power are afraid of the ordinary people, since they feel it necessary. And we've seen that recently, where something really important is going on that's scaring everybody half to death, and top scientists, doctors, and experts in the field itself are being censored all over the place.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
And so it's very difficult even to get the expert opinion you need.
Right. It's not easy because you have to take a lot of time and look places where, not the obvious places, the mainstream media. You have to look yourself, and then you have to filter, like who do I listen to? This person sounds credible, but there's this other person over here who sounds credible too, and they don't agree. And of course, some of us with some experience can maybe weed out some people who we think are not reliable, but there's still enough to thoughtful, intelligent dissension out there that we need to sift through, and that's hard, But that's what we're supposed to be doing. Yeah, go ahead, Paula.
Well, I'm not sure I agree. The thing is that we're, at least here, and I think in the United States too, you're choosing really between blocks of candidates, parties. And even if you don't understand all of their policies, or even if you disagree with them about some of their policies, whoops, what just happened?
We're still listening to you.
Oh, okay. Something went funny on my computer for a minute. Even if you don't agree with all of their policies or even understand them all, generally speaking, they represent a worldview that you have some sympathy with or antipathy toward. And I at least would like to be able to express my opinion about that worldview, even if I don't necessarily understand everything. Now, if you're completely in the dark, you don't know anything about anything, obviously I agree, you probably shouldn't be casting a vote, but I don't think it's that important, given that it's not like you're choosing individuals who are going to be governing and making decisions on their own. You're really electing people to be part of a team. And if you understand generally what that team is about, then it seems to me that you have information enough to make a decision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's there's room here for degrees and like, well, just how informed do you have to be before you say, well, I'm a responsible voter? I mean, there's just infinite degrees of in time you could spend on this, from no time at all. I mean, well, for example, in the write-up, there are links, and this is some of these are comic. Jay Leno, who's an American talk show host, some of you may know who he was. I don't think he's doing it anymore, but he used to be a host of a late night talk show where he would go out and test people's knowledge on the street about various things. And one of the things you can find these on YouTube, and there's a link to them, where he would ask the average American, just random people on the street, what they knew about their government. I mean, he would ask the most basic questions like how many branches of the government are there? And most people didn't know. They could not, there's another study, an actual academic study that was done, questioning of the average Americans, what they, if they knew who their local state representative was. And they calculated that if there was a random serial killer who would go around asking people this question, random people in the street, and if they didn't answer correctly, he'd kill them on the spot. they estimated 70% of people will be killed on the spot because they could not tell you who their local representative
That
was.
would be a solution to the problem.
Yeah, I mean, killing them off, the non. Yeah, but I mean, you would ask people like, how many stars in the American flag? And there was an American flag flying over them when they were asked this. And they said, well, I can't see, the wind is blowing the flag too hard. And it says, so they took a wild guess and they said 36. Or they were asked, what are the, how many justices are on the Supreme Court? Somebody said 420, 50 or something like that. These people, and these were American citizens, not foreigners. You can almost forgive a foreigner for not knowing these things. These were natural born Americans. They couldn't tell you such basic questions as that. And okay, so, and they put these up there and they're kind of comic to listen to them. However, there are some serious studies that have actually surveyed thousands of people to find out what is the amount of political knowledge that the average American have. And it's abysmal. Most people can't tell you who the vice president's name is. I mean, that's how bad it is. Well, okay.
I have a comment.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead,
Oh,
Mike.
sorry, I interrupted you. I'm sorry. Well, one facet of this is that when things start to fall apart, you may get people educating themselves a lot more. That's what happened to me pretty much when Trump came into office. I learned a lot. I read the Constitution and the Federalist Papers and that sort of thing. I got involved a lot more. So, there might be a tipping point. If things get bad enough, people become more educated and knowledgeable.
Yeah, I agree.
I
think some people do, and some people just don't. But go ahead, Paula, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying goodbye. I have to go.
Okay.
This has been lovely. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thanks, Paula. We appreciate your comments. Thanks.
One thing I'd wonder,
that I-
Victor, is of the number of people that don't know basic information like that, how many of them are actually voting? I mean, if they don't have basic, know how many stars are on the flag, are they actually even going to vote?
For the most part, no. They actually represent a very large portion of the population that's completely politically indifferent. They either don't know and they're not interested in knowing, because and this relates to the comment about the despair. Not everyone. Some people just tune out. They feel that there's no connection between what government is doing and their lives, and they're just focusing on attention on what's immediately in front of them, and they just don't see that there's any point in voting for anyone where they've never seen any good or bad, they just don't see the connection between who's running and their personal lives. And they'd actually be right if that Martin Gillen's study was correct, where 90% of the population, it doesn't matter how they vote. It's not going to make a difference to government, just statistically. So they're right. They're right to be indifferent. They're right to not care. That is, if personal interest is what it's all about. Now, maybe some of us feel that we owe not only ourselves, but the society we live in, some level of taking politics seriously, because it does affect people's lives, even if it's not obvious sometimes. But yeah, anyway, the point of bringing that up is that there's a lot of indifference, at least in the United States, and it's probably less so depending on how functioning a democracy is, but a lot of ignorance and indifference about politics in the United States. And it's not unjustified. It's not, some of it may be. A truly irresponsible voter would be someone who does know what's at stake and has educated themselves, and then says, but I don't care. I care more about my personal well-being. I just don't want to waste, but I am informed. Such a person is actually quite rare, I would think, because I think if you took the time to inform yourself, you would have some opinions about this. Or your opinion might be that you know too much about how the voting works and you vote deliberately, but you don't vote. You choose not to vote deliberately because you don't believe the system is worth your time and trouble. And you're doing that not from ignorance, but from a point of knowledge. That's the case. You've done your homework. Go ahead, Galen, you have your.
I was just gonna point out in Canada, and I'm pretty sure in the States as well, whenever an election is held, one of the biggest things that my government does is they start really beating into you, you must vote, you must vote, you must vote, everybody must vote. And really all that does is dilute the amount of smart people. So you get, anytime there's a decent idea out there, you get all these stupid people to vote and it washes out the smart people.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's certainly, you know, big campaigns like that, like you said, in the United States as well, even down here in Mexico. But
also psychological conditioning. It reinforces this belief that democracy is legitimate, that it is, that the country runs on democracy. If it wasn't for this continuous, like on TV, democracy is our most sacred institution. Democracy, 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 democracy. If it wasn't for this, the illusion would break down.
And people actually think that we are in a democracy, which we're not.
Right. But it's, I mean, to keep an illusion alive, you have to feed it constantly.
yeah, that's right. And that's why there hasn't been some rebellion up to now, because people buy into it.
Like if you ask why democracy is good, you will find a distribution of reasons in your survey. If you just ask them a free form and then you write down all the answers, you'll find a distribution, and coincidentally, the distribution will be what they told you on TV. And this is true for it. Humans are basically like a large language model. They regurgitate what they've been trained on. And of course it's like that. Why would it be any other way? Like why would we expect reality to be other than that? That's literally how the entire system works. We push beliefs, reality we call it, into people's minds. And then when we query those minds, it regurgitates what was pushed into. That's how it works.
Any final comments from anybody?
Go
ahead.
If anyone's ever interested in anything that I have to say, let's see, is it that if you Google that, it'll come up with my
Other way.
You have to flip it there.
That's way.
Yeah.
Okay. If you Google that, it'll come up with my Facebook page, and that's my beliefs. And I have a couple articles on what I think about the vote. And anyway, that's my opinions.
Okay, David, do you want to say something?
I was going to just say that you've got to be very careful when we talk about smart people. And I have found, to my sorrow through life, that smart and good do not always go together. As a matter of fact, they
Absolutely.
don't. They just don't.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you, David. And in the last part of this topic, we're actually going to consider a system which takes that into account. That it's going to be part of the design. It's not my idea. It's out there, but it tries to wean us away from an epistocracy in which it's the people with the power, money, and know-how that are running the show, towards something that if you believe in democracy, maybe some people don't, but if you believe what it is, that there's some good that comes out of getting people that are being governed involved in their own government, then it's a better way to do it than the current system we have. But you know, it's experimental, and we'll deal with it.
Yes, and then there was the other question, Pontius Pilate's very good question, what is truth? And the thing is that I think, and I'm joined by a lot of others in this, that truth is always conditional and will change over time. And to a certain extent, as Nietzsche said, perspectival, depends on your point of view.
Yeah.
And we'll always be that way. So if anybody thinks they have absolute truth, I think they're almost guaranteed to be mistaken.
Yeah.
Anyway, I have to go, guys. I'll see you next time.
All right. Bye. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, any final comments from those of us who are still here, or I'll just say something briefly about the next topic for those who are interested in it. Okay, the next one's going to be it's already up there, the partial description. There's a much fuller description on its way. It's going to be about power concentration and how that's really what's in control here, and how power concentration comes about, the magnitude of it, because it's on a scale these days that was not historically new, because of, I mean, there have been powerful entities in the past history, but nothing like what we have today. And how these lead to the corruption, big time corruption on a grand scale. And how that's what we're up against. And that's what is standing in the way of any genuine reform. There's very powerful forces out there that are very entrenched, and what's in it for them to give up what they have right now. And frankly, it's hard to imagine what that would be. Anyway, it's setting up an argument for the final thing about why reform of the existing systems is, while of course we need reform, and there are a lot of things we could do, but there's a lot of things standing in the way of that reform, and we need to be, I think, clear-eyed about what those are. And then finally, well, if that is not possible, what can we do? Short of, violence or, bringing out the pitchforks and hanging people and so forth. But is there a rational way to approach these matters, given what we know now? Maybe they didn't know all of this in past history, but we know a lot of very smart people have been studying this for a long time, and they do have ideas, and we'd like to entertain those ideas. And they may be wrong, and they themselves believe. Even Plato, at the end of his Republic 2,500 years ago, mapped out what he thought was the best possible form of government. And he did take into account many of the things we've been talking about. He may not have gotten it right, and his ideas might not have worked, and he himself said so at the end of it, but it was the best he could do with all the information he had. But we hopefully have more information now, so maybe we can do better. So that's where we're headed. Okay. Yeah, thanks everybody. Okay.
Hey,
Thanks.
thank you.
Right. Okay, bye.